Hello, everyone, and welcome to eLearnChat. I'm Harold Muliati, filling in for Rick Zanotti today, and I'm joined by our co-host Leslie Price, who is with www.learnappeal.com, which is a great charity that's doing a lot to bring learning to many places around the globe, both in developing and developed countries where people don't have access to good learning. How are you doing today, Leslie?
I'm good, thank you, Harold. Still waiting for the baby to arrive, still waiting for my first grandchild, so it's a very exciting time in the Price household.
Soon enough, Leslie
Yeah,
Price will be an official granny.
yes, official.
Yeah. All right. Well, we have a great guest with us today. He's going to talk about graphics, visuals, and that sort of thing in your learning and how to put it together and where you can get it. After a few messages, we'll get back to him. Let's get going.
This show is sponsored by Relate Corporation at www.relate.com, your training and video partner.
Well, unfortunately, we had another one after that, but it seems to have glitched out. It was actually a promotion for it was a promotion for voiceover masterclass. Who was it's Peter Bakers. He's another guest we've had on before, and a lot of people have expressed interest in us giving out info about voiceover resources. But anyways, I'll put it in the description since it hasn't shown up. And we have in our central position of power, we've got Bryan Jones with eLearningArt. How
Harold,
are you
thanks for
doing,
having
Bryan?
me, and Leslie, thanks for being here while you're on the clock here and could rush away any minute to have to head to the hospital and be a grandma. Now, is your daughter in the same town that you're in, or is she further away?
No, she only lives 15 minutes from me, so I live
That's
in a village and she lives in the nearest town. So it's not far.
that's
Not
great.
far.
Yeah, so I'm hoping we can talk. I've been building e-learning now since 2000, and my biggest struggle has been with graphics. Right, I'm not a graphic designer, kind of an accidental instructional designer, and have had to, through my own struggles. My first job, I actually had a whole team. There was a media department. I had like Harold is actually at Relate, does all the graphics, and so I had a whole team of Heralds who I would just say this is
Yeah.
what I want, and things would magically appear, and life was good. But when I went out there as a consultant, where I was that solo training department of one, I could do the instructional design piece, but when it came to build the actual slides, it was such a struggle. And I think that's a struggle that a lot of people have, and a lot has changed since the last interview and since I started eLearningArt. So I thought we'd just kind of talk about what the different options are, what we like and what we don't like about them, and then obviously, I've spent a decade building graphics for e-learning, so I can talk about what my approach is and how I think about assets that to add to the eLearningArt library and why I choose to add those.
Well, and
I think it's a really important, I think it's a really important topic to cover, Brian, because as I say, as Harold mentioned at the beginning, I work for a charity called Learn Appeal, and we have volunteers who create content for us. And it's they've got to rework content from PDFs. So they want to put images in, they want to put photographs in, they want to put different graphics in. And I keep saying to them, and I can't say it often enough, if you're going to put a graphic in, you must ensure that that it's either free or got a Creative Commons license, or that and that you also give credit, because certainly as a charity which is regarded as the e-learning industry charity, we can't in any way seem to be passing off on anything, and we certainly couldn't afford any legal action taken against us. And I don't think people realize that copyright actions really do exist.
yeah, and Bryan was talking about going into doing the instructional design and having to do some of the graphic stuff without having the training. And that's a big problem when people have to put things together that include graphics and they don't necessarily have the training and education on the graphic side of things. One of the big things is just copyright and sort of the rights management side of putting in visual, even audio resources.
Yeah, and we were talking right before we went live here. It's so easy now to do it the wrong way. You have Google image search, you have Google regular search that's serving up images for you to just think, not just giving credit, but even if you gave credit, you may not have the proper license to use that image. So if you find something on Google Images, even if you've run certain filters, you may end up with an image that the copyright is owned by somebody else. And even though it was shown to you, you don't have the right, and served to you by Google, you don't actually have the right to use it. So there's a lot of time, if Google is going to be your resource, you're actually going to have to kind of hunt down where that image came from, and is it truly part of Creative Commons? Is it not? Is there a picture of a person that's in there? Was there a model release? What was the source? So it goes beyond just providing credit. You actually have to do a little bit of homework if that's your avenue, and that's one of the hardest things is the time that it takes to do that.
And you made a good point, because Google Images has a relatively new feature that can actually give you a false sense of security. They have an option where you can search for images only under a certain license, like public domain or Creative Commons 0, for example. However, I have found it's not accurate at all. You actually you go put on that option, but then you actually have to go to the site and find the license for that image. So if you can actually find that image is under, say, a Creative Commons 0, which basically means you can use an image for whatever, then you can use it, but you have to check.
Yeah, and it takes a lot of time to hunt it down. It's a frustrating process. The other thing is, even if you found that image and it was marked as Creative Commons 0, anyone could have submitted an image. There's not necessarily a verification process that's happening. Even if there was a verification, even if the photographer took that photo themselves, and let's say I take a picture of Harold, and I'm like, great, I'm going to release this to the public domain. There's other issues around that. I actually, without a model release from Harold, even if I posted it in the Creative Commons free license, that you would be in violation of Harold's rights as the model who didn't sign the model release. So there's some tricky stuff. Even when you end up with what you think is a free image, there's still some legal implications that you can run into with that. It's really tricky, and one of the biggest frustrations in trying to track down and do things the right way with the free stuff that you find.
So where do we start then, Bryan? Where do we start?
Well, of course, I'm going to say eLearningArt, but we can talk about the other resources. And actually, eLearningArt is based on my own frustrations in building the library that I wanted. So we can talk about eLearningArt and the other resources around that. I think if you're looking, the opposite of finding something free is, okay, well, let's look at the stock photo sites where I'm paying for a license. Now, one of the big advantages there is there's a license that you can go look at. It's been curated. It's part of they have kind of verified that license exists and are being clear about that. So you'll find sites that have millions of images, 10 million, 5 million, 100 million, like lots of images. And that's nice that there's lots of options, but it's actually also a frustrating thing, because trying to find what you need, especially for, can you guys still hear me? My screen just flickered.
Yeah.
We're getting a little freezing on your feed, but your audio is fine.
Okay, great. So finding what you need on a stock photo site, it's built for the perfect marketing photo, right? If you're looking to put something on your website, if you're looking to put something in print copy, stock photo sites are great. But when you're trying to build slide-based learning where you have a sequential story or maybe a character walking through different work scenarios, it's actually quite a struggle to find things that work. Harold, how do you find working with like the traditional stock photos?
This is definitely true. I mean, we use Adobe Stock for a lot of our stuff, but not necessarily for e-learning avatars and that sort of thing, because they're just not optimized in terms of search and organization for, say, finding a lot of pictures of the same person at the same shoot. A lot of times you can, for example, on Adobe Stock, you can you can look for pictures of the same model, but then you've got the same model in, 100 different costumes doing that many different things. And a lot of times it doesn't even, if you say like more from this series or something like that, it doesn't even show you all from that series. You have to, it's very incomplete in what it shows you. And the image you're looking for, the pose you're looking for likely is there, but they don't let you search for it correctly. And they also often don't let you search within, like many of the stock photo sites don't let you search, like refine your search within, say, a certain uploader or a certain author, which would help a lot in that respect.
And
Yeah, I think
most
the other.
people, some
Oh, go ahead,
people
Leslie.
on the show, some people who are listening or watching may not even understand some of the terminology that you guys are using. Because certainly most of the people that I come across who work in e-learning design, digital learning design, if you ask them how they got into the career, and you hinted at it as well, Bryan, how did you get into this career? Oh, by accident. It wasn't a deliberate career choice. So people fall into something by accident, and then all of a sudden they've actually got to do quite thorough research to ensure that everything they're doing is legal and above board. And very often they don't think about, they just think, it's a photo, it's an image.
Totally. And I think that's one of the, there's kind of a joy on your first project before you actually start building, where you're excited about building out the slides. I feel like the part where it starts becoming not fun anymore is when you actually try to build the slide with the graphics, especially if you don't have graphic design experience. If you're that accidental instructional designer, you get in there and it's like, oh, great, here are all these different resources I can use. There's free stuff, and there's stock photo sites, and there's all these other options. But when you actually then try to use it, it's like, it's just so frustrating trying to do the build, and you start questioning. You start questioning if the project is actually going to be as fun as you thought it might be when you started.
So where do you start, Bryan? Where do you start?
Well, I can tell you, there's certainly other resources we can talk about. I'm happy to talk about how I think about eLearningArt. I mean, eLearningArt, the core of the library is around pictures of people, like what Harold was just talking about. But the way that we think about a series, when I first did my first photo shoot in LA, this was over 10 years ago. I thought I was shooting a lot of the same model in one outfit. It was 75 poses. Now, a single character, when we shoot them, will have like 750, so 10 times as many, 10 times as many photos within a core set, like call it business casual. You'll have 250 different poses, and that's because, like stock photo sites, you're going to end up having people facing the camera instead of being able to have a cinematic effect. So when I'm thinking about eLearningArt, it's I'm always trying to build not the finished photo, but the individual pieces that somebody can assemble into what they want. So there's the Harold character and the Leslie character and the Bryan character, and Bryan can be talking and Leslie can be listening, and Harold can be angry and I can be sad. And we can kind of sequence to use still photos by compositing them into a story, into a scenario. And you might say, well, why pictures of people and why do things that way? Typically, when we're talking about building training, there's some sort of performance problem that a person needs to be doing something differently. So as much as you can kind of relate that back to what it is that they're either doing wrong or right, and put it in the context, the more interesting and relevant the training is to what they're building. So that's generally how I am approaching things: is can I provide the individual components so that you can tell the story that you want, closest to workplace learning and the environment that you want people doing things.
And to Leslie's earlier point, the thing that Bryan's talking about now about, having, say, 750 pictures of someone in different poses, in doing different things that can be inserted in different ways into your learning. I was talking earlier about e-learning avatars, and that's one name for that kind of thing. They're sometimes called avatars, narrators, characters. So people know what to look for when they're searching for this kind of thing, or go to eLearningArt and get them.
Yeah, totally. And then there's other options that you have. So one of them would be, so in a perfect world, right? You would have a ginormous budget, and you would go do custom photo shoots for everything, and you'd have unlimited resources and be able to do that. You would get great photos in the environment, and everything would be great, and it would be matching exactly the workplace situation that you're talking about. It's unrealistic. I mean, most people don't have 5-figure budgets to do that sort of stuff. It's great if you do, and more power to you. That was never me, and it's not most people. And there are problems too when you have those big budgets and you don't do that photo shoot. Oh gosh, I wish I had done. There were these 3 shots that I missed. I need a second photo shoot to do it. It's pretty frustrating with that. So that's the custom photo shoot thing. Not many people are able to do it. So you might be thinking, oh great, well then maybe I can do a DIY. I'll do it myself. I'll go take pictures around the workplace with my smartphone or a DSLR or whatever. It ends up being so much harder than you think it's going to be to get the photos right. And I actually have heard that if you're going to shoot real people in your workplace, make sure you get a model release. And I have heard from several people, real projects they've worked on where they built out a training with somebody who worked at the company at the time who got fired for something. And then the stakeholder comes back and is like, you have to either cut this person out of these images, or you've got to cut those slides out, find something different. So there are certainly issues that can pop up around the DIY stuff as well. Just if you're going to shoot people, please shoot pictures of people. Please get the model release and make sure that you're okay in case they leave. The other side of that's interesting is people kind of come in with their own perceptions. When you show them their workplace and you show them real people, they may have an opinion of that person or the situation. So just know that you may, even though you're shooting in the real work environment, that you may be distracting some people with the message that you're trying to get because they already have their own opinions about that person and who they are in real life or the workplace environment that they're in.
Yeah, and the point about people's experience with other people kind of coloring how they see those pictures, that's kind of an interesting thing because we also have the thing, probably especially in this country where a lot of companies are scared of showing the wrong kind of people and getting sued because either they didn't show enough diversity or they're saying, we don't want to show such and such group of people doing such and such thing because that's going to make it seem like they're lazy or something like that. So what I've seen a lot also is customers asking for icons or more abstract things rather than actual photos.
Yeah, totally. And that's one way to dial that back with not having there's no real person that you're relating to it. And I'm all for also using illustrated characters. I default to photo characters when I can, and then illustrated characters. I do feel like
people will feel more of a connection when there's a real person.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And I think the problem you run into, and you can run into it with photo characters as well, but I just did a relaunch of some characters that, so PowerPoint is my main graphic design tool. I use it to do everything. I never get into Photoshop. If you ask me to, I'm going to break out in a sweat. I'm in trouble. Like I'm not the Photoshop guy. So everything that is built needs to, if I'm going to be the person in there, it needs to be something that I can edit in PowerPoint. And the old format, there's some interesting stuff going on with PowerPoint formatting. The old format was EMF, EMF was the more recent one, but you could actually ungroup clip art that was styled the right way. Now the new version of PowerPoint, and actually they've backdated it, they're allowing SVGs, and I spent the last couple of months really figuring out how those things can be layered. And so we have some versions where you can remove, you could like change the color of if I were an illustrated character, you could change the color of my jacket. You could bend my arm at the elbow. You could swap out a hard hat onto somebody. So again, thinking about that person who is not the designer and is not going to be able to illustrate in that style, but with the elements, they could actually sequence it themselves and they could edit in PowerPoint.
Yeah, and I think this is a big part of what you were talking about, how you structure stuff on eLearningArt, but also just like when you're looking for resources in general for e-learning, especially if you're on a smaller budget, like if you're like Leslie, you're on a nonprofit budget and stuff like that, you want to find resources that you might be able to reuse or repurpose later on, and that's what we often do. That we often try to find things that not just something that's usable for this one project on this one slide kind of thing, but like you're saying, things that you can put into different configurations, things that you can get more use out of.
Yeah, I think one of the frustrating things,
there was a program on I was watching earlier on today. I don't know if you have the same thing in the UK. It was on last night. It's called The Apprentice, and it's Alan Sugar, with the however many young people in the room, and one of them's going to eventually be his business partner. And this week they had to design a roller coaster, but they also had to do logos and imagery for it. And one of the groups, had something that was black and green, and they had the thing on it about, I can't remember what they used, but everybody they showed the image to, said, "Oh, that message, that color sends to me alien. It looks alien to me." And that then got in the people's head, and what it was meant to be was dreamlike. But people saw the green and the hand and the black, and they just had in their head, these colors mean alien.
Yeah.
Yeah, we process visuals so fast without even, it's not something that it's conscious. You've already processed your first reaction onto a visual right away.
And that's definitely true. You have to be very careful with the colors that you're using. The basic visual elements of your design really can affect the way that people respond to it. Red, for example, people might find it exciting, but a lot of times we're told not to use bright reds and stuff in our pieces, just because they think people might find it threatening or stressful, which is why we have our background here is blue, because it's colorful, but it's also seen as a slightly more relaxing or unifying color. There are other things too, like to watch out for, like if you have too many vertical lines in your piece, then that might be, people might subconsciously kind of perceive those as walls and think that you're closing things off. So it's like you have to make sure you have a lot of open space, and diagonal lines might be seen as something that's more dynamic, or a lot of this design, and a lot of this design stuff you do have to be careful about, because it can get into the territory of sort of pseudoscience, but there are certain psychological cues that people see and they just immediately think of something.
Yeah, you talk about the white space.
Do you find this too, Bryan?
Sorry, what was that?
I was going to say, do you find this too? Is this something that you come across? Use of color.
Yeah, I'm not so this blue. I'm glad that you said blue is awesome, because here I am, and I did not think about what that would do. I when it's getting into, like, I'm definitely not the guy when it's getting into picking a color scheme. I start to struggle, so I will look for other resources to help me with that, or like matching fonts. Some of that is beyond what I feel like I could design well with. What I'm good at is modifying existing things. So if I saw, as an e-learning developer, I think that's a really good skill to have, is if you could take, like, here's the example slide and like the color scheme, can I then extract the information out of that? Can I look and see what the fonts are that are on there? Can I pull those colors out of there using a color picker? Can I then upload that and find other colors that might, so you might be able to do something in a monochromatic thing where all you're doing is making it slightly darker or lighter, to give it a consistent color theme? Or can you enter it into, there's plenty of sites that are out there now, you can just, here's the color that I have, and it'll kick out, like, here are 3 colors that work with that, or 5 colors that work with that. I am operating on that more than my own color theory knowledge. I kind of rely on the resources that are out there.
And this actually is probably the best way to do it. You find something designed, even if it's not an e-learning piece, it's some other thing like a website or something that you feel gives you the sort of mood that you're going for, and you just try to theme your colors similarly. I mean, a lot of times with e-learning pieces, because they're heavily branded, a lot of times we already have the kind of color decisions made for us, because you have to use the company colors and that sort of thing. But in a lot of times there is a little bit of wiggle room within that.
Yeah, and so yeah, sometimes you're right that you get here's our corporate color scheme, and this is what you're going to use. But knowing then how to pull that across and make it look nice is it's actually on some level it's easier, right? It's like this is what you're operating with, and you've got to do it, but you can still be creative within constraints. And again, like if you don't have that color scheme pulled in there, I think that the number one skill, I can't, if you gave me a blank slide, I would struggle to create a design. But finding something that I like and then pulling the elements and building that or extending it, right? Here's the one slide that I want, but now I need 4 different layouts. I need to also be able to add this sort of interaction. I can pull that piece across and make it look good by just taking the original elements and modifying them. So I look at myself as more of a modifier than a creator.
Yeah, precisely. And a lot of times it does come down to modification. I was wondering, you're talking about the black and green, Leslie. Have you gotten any feedback? Because like Learn Appeal, one of their main colors is green, and a lot of times black is used too. Have you ever heard the alien thing?
No, but it was the image that had also been used. So on the Learn Appeal colors, I mean, I've got a thing here where it's Learn Appeal, but what we've got actually stands out. And I think because we use shades of green, and I don't know, they chose the green before I came on board. But I actually quite like it because it does stand out, and it's in some ways the green in that is a bit more natural than the internet, if that makes sense. So it's learning without the internet, and maybe that was one of the reasons. I mean, it was professionally designed, but maybe that was one of the reasons they went for it.
Well, yes. I mean, green does have a lot of, it brings to mind vegetation and that sort of thing, freshness, and
Yeah.
so there are definitely, and it is the green wavelengths are what the human eye is most sensitive to color-wise. So it does have those things. And it's generally not seen as a threatening color. That's another good thing.
So what other sites can people go to? I mean, have you got, or is there a checklist or something that you know of anywhere that people could go and look up?
Yeah, I'll put a checklist together for that. I do, and I have seen some that are out there, but they generally fall into these same buckets with the same problems. And one of the ones that we didn't talk about is over the last I'd say 5 years, you're starting to see the authoring tools themselves starting to pull
That's
in
true.
libraries, and it's interesting. And if I were talking about like the pro of it is great. It's free. It's built in with the price that you paid for the tool. And that's nice, and they're a good starting point. But from what I've found so far, and maybe this changes over time, but a lot of them are really just porting the free. It's like some API that they're using where they're porting in the free stuff to pump up numbers for marketing. So, we've got 5 million images in our library, but you go there and it's the same stuff you find on the stock photo sites that runs into all the same problems. You're going to run into all of the same problems that we talked about before, where these are images that were built for marketing. They weren't built for whatever. They were built for workplace learning, slide-based development, e-learning.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, Harold, have you actually used any of the images within tools?
Not a whole lot, but recently we actually have been using a good amount of the stock footage from Articulate's 360, because they have 360 content library, and they have a few different kinds of content. For example, their stock images collection is but their stock footage collection is actually pretty good, and we've actually made a good amount of use of that recently.
How are you using the stock footage? I'm curious.
We're actually using it in. We've used it in a bunch of different things. We've used it on our shows. We've used it in videos
So
elsewhere.
will it be like is it more like a workplace learning thing? Like here are two people, they're talking and they're over by a computer and you're doing that? Or is it like motion graphics that were provided that you're using? I'm curious.
It is stock footage, like actual video footage, but it's they have it of a lot of different things. Like we've airplanes taking off, time lapses of plants and that sort of thing.
So using it for like visual storytelling within a course.
Yeah, basically, kind of more of that sort of thing rather than not so much like specific e-learning scenario stuff, because they actually don't have a whole lot of that. When we use stuff for that, I've found more on we have a subscription with a site called Digital Juice, which has like a lot of templates and stuff like that, but they have stock footage as well, and we tend to use more from there.
I'm a Digital Juice like I don't know what it was, founding membership.
Yeah, we have that too.
Where I bought it like 10 years ago, and I have access to that. I don't use it. I don't use it frequently. I don't think I've logged in a while, but I think it ended up being pretty cheap, and you have access to a lot of stuff. Again, it wasn't. There's a lot of great stuff for marketing and some footage in there, and some stock sounds and some other stuff. But it's designed again more for somebody trying to build marketing stuff or videography than it is for people building workplace learning. Yeah, that's the tough thing, Leslie. I think that the list is long. They all fall into these buckets, and the frustration is that most of the other stuff was built for another use, but as e-learning developers, we are trying to take it and put it into our workflow when it was never really designed for that. And it's frustrating and time consuming, and it's a struggle, and it makes it not so fun.
No, I was just wondering if there was. I was just wondering if there was, if there is or was a checklist out there that, particularly, for example, at LearnAppeal, we have an awful lot of students who are doing either undergraduate or master's degrees who want to build a career in e-learning. So they come and volunteer for us in order to start building their skills in, e-learning design. And I just wondered if there was anywhere that you could recommend that apart from your own company, which I can obviously recommend them to.
I would. I'll try to pull something together. I feel like I've seen a few lists out there, and I just don't know offhand who has them. But in thinking through some of the stuff we were going to talk about today, I kind of have my checklist of what buckets things fall into, and it wouldn't be so hard to then turn that into okay, well, what are the good resources from within each one of those buckets that you could use. So maybe that's something that I can put together and get added to the show notes later.
Yeah, I genuinely think that would be very, very useful, because people who are starting out their career, if they have fallen into it by accident, they very often don't know where to start looking.
Yeah, and that's almost everyone who's building e-learning. And there are some people that are intentional instructional designers, but very few are. Most people, they were an expert in some role they were working in. They got pulled in as a subject matter expert, like, oh, hey, you know a lot about this topic. How about you build this? Or they work in HR, and somebody's like, oh, you work in HR, so you should work on training people. And so here's a license to an authoring tool, and go try to do it.
Yeah.
And that does make me think it would be interesting if someone put together like a tutorial on how to for people basically in that situation, how to get visual assets for the stuff you need to make without getting in trouble, basically, because it's a tough thing to navigate.
One of the authoring tools or LMSs I saw do an article on that, and I think Mike Taylor had some good resources. I'll try to pull some stuff together. I'll try to pull something together after the call and see if we can put something together for your audience in some sort of checklist.
Yeah.
Oh, and one other warning for people out there putting this kind of stuff together. You have to watch out for templates, because I'm sure Bryan's templates are clean, but sometimes you'll get templates and they'll have images and stuff like that included in them, and those images you don't necessarily have the rights to use. Images or music included in the templates, and you can get in trouble. That actually happened to us here at Relate, where we had, in this case, it was slightly different. It was a web design template for a WordPress site, and it was a stock. It was like a rotator, an image rotator widget they call it, and it had sample images in it which we weren't actually using. However, the company that apparently had the rights to one of these images, Tetra images, crawled our site and found that even though it wasn't indexed on our site, they found this one image, and they found their metadata tag that basically told them that they owned this image, and they took legal action against us. And I think it ultimately cost us, like, I think it was $2,500 or something. It's not cheap to get.
There's a whole seedy underbelly to the stock photo world. Things have gotten better. Like places like Getty Images will let people use some of the stock photos under a different type of license when you credit the source and it links back. But there is I've had friends, same thing. He built a sample website and had a Getty image that he had put on there as just a placeholder. It wasn't even meant for public consumption, but it was on there. It got crawled, and they sent him a cease and desist with a $1,200 bill for the one image that he was just like didn't even mean to use. So there are actually companies where they have lawyers and they crawl sites, and this is what their business is they take a cut of all these fines that they pass out to people. It's a really sucky experience.
Yeah, and the technology for them to find these images has gotten a lot better in the last few years, so you have to be really careful about this kind of thing nowadays.
Yeah, it's not just metadata in the image now. They can do reverse image searches on it based on the like matching the photo with probably AI and all sorts of other crazy stuff. But yeah, that stuff that's not so fun. And that's with my templates. The nice thing is we don't do any we don't have any third party assets. It's all owned by eLearningArt's. So there's I don't have issues if I take eLearningArt images and put them into a template when somebody gets it. And that's been a strategy. Sometimes it can be frustrating to say, oh gosh, this other site has 2 million images or 5 million images, and eLearningArt has 50,000 character images, and then templates. It seems small, but actually in the approach that we've taken with the compositing thing, I had one of my friends from grad school who's really good at math do some combination, figured out how many 2-character scenes could you build with the 50,000 images, assuming X number of characters, X number of images in each set. And I think he did it back when it was 30,000 images. The number came up to 4 billion combinations that you could do, because you've got, it doesn't take very long. You've got Harold talking and Leslie listening. Now you've got Leslie angry and Harold sad. And you can and then now we're going to swap out the background. And you mix in the Bryan set, and then you mix in another set and another set. And so then the numbers get exponential, but you're starting from a point of, hey, let me choose the person that I want to be in the scene and then build what I want. And the options are essentially limitless, right? 4 billion versus let me start with 50 million images and try to narrow it down through this funnel to find the one that I like that doesn't work for me. So that it's just a different philosophy. But I thought that was some interesting math. I can't verify the math because I don't understand what he did, but it was pretty cool.
Anyway, I think we've kind of run out of time here, Bryan. Yeah, it's been absolutely fascinating talking to you. It'd be great if you could, maybe you can come on again when you've got the checklist and talk people through the checklist. That would be a good one, wouldn't it, Harold? Mm-hmm. Maybe you can work with Harold on the checklist. Give Harold another job to do.
And I actually, one of the previous interviews that I did with you guys, I did a freebie that people can go to. If they go to eLearningArt.com/relate, there's like 100 free eLearningArt character images and some other stuff that comes with that. But anyone who signs up for that, when that checklist is put together, I'll add that into what they have access to. So if somebody's go ahead.
I don't have that in our description yet, but I'll definitely add that to the description below so people can click on it.
Yeah. So in the short term, for the next day or two, or however long it takes me to put together the checklist, it'll just be some free images. Then you can try doing this, using this image compositing technique for free, and then we'll add that checklist once it's available.
All right.
Great.
Excellent. Thank you for coming on, Bryan. I hope to people watching the show. I hope this was helpful. We're trying to provide some helpful resources and letting people know, what things to watch out for, because it can be a bit of a minefield sometimes, this whole using assets thing.
Yeah, we feel your pain because we've all been through it. So yeah, it's tough. It's tough being an e-learning developer out there.
And on the topic of creating your own content for the e-learning, I got the little ad for Peter Baker, the voiceover guy, to work. So I'll probably show it right before our outro, and then we'll go to our outro.
Sounds good.
All right.
Thanks for having me on,
Thanks,
guys.
Ben.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for coming on.
See you next time, Brian. Bye, Harold.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Hello, I'm Peter Baker. Please visit voiceovermasterclass.com to see details of the training courses I have on offer for new and existing voice talents to further their career by enhancing voice and technical skills, as well as essential marketing tips.